Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining me on this special edition of Speak Your Mind with Larry Cox. Tonight, we're going to have a special guest. We're going to have Brett Mauldin. He is running for Georgia House District 114, and that is right adjacent to Rockdale County. So, it is always good to have your neighbor be friendly with you when you need help in the legislature. So, I want to thank you guys for joining us. I'm going to bring on our guest right now and let him introduce himself to you so you know who he is. Hey,
Uh,
Brett.
how you doing, Larry? Good to see
I'm
you, man.
good to see you too, man. Great to have you join us here on the show tonight. And I'll let you do a little quick introduction.
Yeah, so my name is Brett Mauldin, running for House Seat 114, which all the numbers start, confusing everything. It is the northern and eastern part of Newton counties, all of Morgan, and these primarily the social circle portion of Walton County. So, yeah, running to be able to represent beautiful area. And it's a seat that Tim Fleming used to have, and he actually vacated it so that he could run for Secretary of State. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, and then like I tell people is you're a neighbor, so you are actually touch.
That's right. I heard somebody say the other day, he said, "Well, you wouldn't be my representative." And the person said, "You need to pick out which representative you like the best in the whole state of Georgia, and that's your representative
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they get the same number of votes as the one that's sitting in your district."
Well, it's the way what I like about this, right? So we get you elected, and you hug Rockdale County on this side, and then I already have a good friend that got elected a couple years ago, and she hugs us on the south side of Rockdale. So Rockdale will be almost all the way surrounded by good friends of mine that represent districts that are touch Rockdale County,
That
and
always pick up the phone, right?
it is important. It's important because you got to look when you've got people that are that close. We help each other
That's right.
because some of your needs are our needs and our needs are your needs,
That's right.
and that's what we've got to look at, right? So I'm excited about your campaign. I've been following your campaign, because we helped you in a campaign a few years ago, and you ran a really good race a few years ago against a strong incumbent, and you did really well. And I knew you were going to come back at some point and run a strong race for something. And by George, you are running a fantastic race, and I can't wait till next Tuesday till we see these results that are gonna happen next Tuesday.
That's
Well,
right.
Brett, what I'd like to do is bring some. Let's talk about you, right? Let's talk about the beginnings of Brett Mauldin. Where were you born and raised?
So I was born in Marietta, and we moved down to Lake Oconee area when I was about 7 or 8 years old, and was raised in construction. Been in Green Putnam and Morgan pretty much my whole life. So started working with my dad in his construction company. We do at the time we just did cultured marble, and because we always joke around and say there's no child labor laws when it's your child. So I started working with him when I was 11. So I always knew that I wanted to come back in the area, and really loved what we were doing with construction. So left after was a 5 sport athlete in high school. You know, when you're a decent athlete at a small school, you're expected to play all the sports. So went to West Georgia for a year and played football. And when that was over, God opened a door for me to go up to a small Christian school near Chattanooga called Lee University, and played rugby there. So I was the captain of the rugby team because people say I wasn't smart enough to keep a helmet on.
Yep.
Um, and that's where I met my beautiful wife. She's from Asheville, North Carolina, and we've been married for 20 years now, and we have 3 amazing kids. One just got his learner's license, so that's been a fun experience. I can
I know Brett's wife, right? So I'm just gonna tell you guys, even though y'all look at Brett and y'all see a handsome fella there, I want y'all still know he's still batting out of his league with
oh
his wife.
100%,
So
100%.
just so y'all know.
She's the best thing that's ever happened to me. She keeps me grounded. My biggest cheerleader, and in politics they say the biggest vote you can ever get your spouse. And she actually cut our commercial for us And it was a whole mindset that everybody is jealous for my time when I come home from work, and including her. Like, I love spending time with my family. That's People ask me what I do when I get off of work. I just love my family, you know. But at the end of the commercial, it was a really poignant comment she made. She said, "But the same reason that we all want Brett around is the same reason we know he needs to serve." So that was something that really spoke volumes. And being able to win your wife over and her vote, that's a huge, in this in politics and whatnot.
Well, I'm going to tell you, me being in politics also, right? I'm going to tell you, to get your wife to be okay with you running for office is that's actually the win right there. It's for
Yeah.
them to be okay with you running and then supporting you 100% in your run. That's when you know you're on the right track. Is
Well,
when your spouse supports you.
one of the things I'll share a quick story. So I ran before, and we're really big on keeping it clean. People are tired of dirty politics. They're tired of mudslinging. And to be honest, like, that's just not my style. In my business, if you're coming to sell me something, don't tell me why you're the least worst product. You don't stink as bad as the other guy. Tell me why your product is good. And I think that really speaks volumes to people now. But me and that gentleman, he's actually running for attorney general now. We're good friends. Like, I see him, we hug. And my consultant was telling me, he's like, I know y'all said y'all were friendly, but I've never seen two candidates hug that ran against each other. But the story was, I felt God really called me to run the first time. And my wife was like, "Well, God told you to run. Why didn't you win?" I was like, "God told me to run. He didn't tell me to win." And she was coming back from Bible study about a week after that conversation. And she said, Brett, they were talking about that Abraham took Isaac up to the mountain to sacrifice him. God provided for him. He never intended for him to kill Isaac. He just wanted to know that he would sacrifice everything he held dear for God. And that's what she's like, now I finally understand it. You sacrificed your time with your family, your free time, your time with at work. You sacrificed it all for him, and he wanted to know that you would do that. And I was like, maybe that's the case. But the beautiful thing is the whole time we were preparing my team to run the company without me. And the second week I would have been in session had I won. My parents were in a horrific car accident. My team was prepared to run the business without me. So I was able to take off. My mom was in the hospital. She had 26 broken bones, a crushed vertebrae. My dad had internal bleeding. And I was able to stay at the hospital with them for 3 months, sleeping on the couch, rotating with my sister, whatever, on who was staying with them. And had I not been running for office, and had I not prepared my team and them stepped up to the challenge, because they're phenomenal guys and phenomenal ladies that run our company, I wouldn't have been able to have that opportunity. So I know that wasn't what you asked, but
but I think that's important, because you ran that political race, and it laid the foundations for something else.
Yeah.
Right. It laid the foundation that business would be okay when this other thing happened, and you were able to step away, because you were planning to be up, if you won the election, to have to step away for 3 or 4 months. You had to step away for 3 or 4 months, but it wasn't for the reason you had planned.
And it's amazing how God works all that stuff out. That had he told me, you better prepare because your parents are going to be in a horrific car accident, like, I would have been a nervous wreck the whole time. But he had it looked like it was one thing, and ended up he was preparing me for something completely different. So now, I mean, we get, luckily my parents both made it out, and they're doing great. They never complain, so we wouldn't know if they were doing bad anyway. But getting to cherish those moments with them, and getting to spend more time with the family as well. So that's beautiful.
It is. So let's go back to Brett Mauldin, the story. So you graduated from Lee University. You met your wife there, and then you came back to Georgia, correct?
I did. As soon as I could, I got back to this beautiful state. So it ran the family business. Started full time in 2004, and I remember the amount we did that year, the first full year that I was back. We actually will do that in a week and a half, 2 week span now. So we've been able to grow it the right opportunities. We went from doing work in 3 different counties, neighboring counties, to where now we're doing work in 10 different states. So it has been a beautiful journey. In 2024, we were actually named the SBA Small Family Owned Business of the Year. So we were proud of that. And it's just another testament to how amazing our team is. They make me look good. And that's amazing. We believe in decentralized command. So you'll hear that theme a lot with me when I'm talking about politics, because I believe that you put people in positions to lead, you coach them up, you put the right people in positions to lead, you coach them up, and you're there to help facilitate and stay out of their way. And really, that's how I view this position. As a state rep, you're there to facilitate what the local governments want to do. So the closer you get power to the people, the better it is for the people. So, yeah. So my 3 kids, my son is 15 years old, like I was saying. He's a competitive swimmer and a really good musician. And then my 2 daughters, one of them is big into basketball and dance. And the other one is, believe it or not, good at archery and soccer. So those are her passions.
Brett, I remember when you ran the last race, one of your daughters was taller than your son,
Yeah.
and your son is almost taller than you now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was 6'3" at my tallest, and I think he is almost 6 foot now at 15. So we think he's going to outgrow me.
Yeah. So I remember. I think one of your daughters was taller than him back then, and now he's just like, yeah. I saw the family picture the other day, and I said, man, he has grown.
Yeah. But
He
they
has
are
grown.
they're great kids. I mean, we've truly been blessed, and couldn't ask for a better family. So yeah, that's more or less me. I mean, we're really big at servant's heart. I mean, my life verse after I got saved was Matthew 5:16. Let your light shine before men, so they can see your good deeds and give glory to your Father in heaven. And I believe that whether we're leading in our business, in our family, or in the community, or at the state level, if we're blessed enough to win, I mean, that's our whole mindset: is how do we point people back to God by how we act? Even if they don't believe in him, we're going to lead in a way that is not going to tarnish his name.
Brett, you and I had talked about this years ago whenever you were first. And one of the reasons that I wanted to help you was because of your strong relationship with God. And I had told you what I had decided to do was I was stepping away from prison ministry at the time. And I told you I was going to get involved as a Christian male again in politics, because I did not believe we had enough Christian males in politics, in leadership. And to me, it was an important thing. And to see you doing that, it was just something that, that I wanted to help with. Right. Yeah. So, and I don't talk about it a lot, even with, the folks here in Rockdale, because, I don't talk about doing the prison ministry for 16 years. I don't really, that's not something I talk about. But, but it's, with me, I look at this as my ministry now. And with you, I know that's the same thing. This is part of your ministry that you're going to be doing. And that inspires me to see other Christian males taking that leap and getting involved in leadership, so that we know that we have these good family values and men leading us in government. So what are some of the go ahead.
When people sit there and hear about a Christian leader in politics or in business, it's not hiding behind the cross. But one of the things that we talk about is people always talk about how Christians need to be meek. And I think that many people misconstrue that as them being weak, because the Jesus that I served, he flipped over some tables and ran people out with a whip. So just because we're Christians doesn't mean we don't have a strong backbone. And we needed more men. See, we need more men and women who are willing to stand up for what we believe in, instead of just being doormats for people. And so even though you're hearing me being a strong Christian, a strong faith, that strong faith allows me to have a backbone because, David was a man after God's own heart, and he was a warrior king, and he fought and fought and fought. So, but his son was able to live in peace, Solomon. So
Yep.
if I got to be the one that, and don't read into this theoretically, or to get blood on his hands so that his family lives in peace, I'm all for that. I love the fact that we're able to be strong men and women and be able to fight for the truth. So
Well, I'm not afraid to say, you throw the men and women thing in there, and I'm just going to tell you right now, I think in this Atlanta metro area, we have a lack of men willing to step forward and run for office,
mm,
uh, and I think we can tell in this area, and I challenge more men to run for office and do what God's called them to do, because God called men to lead,
mhm.
and I don't see men taking that challenge from God right now and doing that. So I challenge more men to take up that mantle and run for office and lead. More Christian men need to do that. Well, Brett, let me ask you so this House race, what are some of the things that you've seen that you think as a House member you'll be able to impact in government and leadership? What kind of things are you going to bring to the table that you want to help your district and help Georgians?
That's a great question. Well, first and foremost, what I'll be able to bring to them is common sense. There's too many times that we pass laws and don't look at the repercussions. We don't look at, some of the fallout from, unintended consequences. Things that I want to see done, or, I would love to see us get rid of the state income tax. I think that there's many ways to be able to do this. When I was talking to some people about that, and they said, "Well, how can you do that without, raising the sales tax?" I'm like, "Well, let me just talk to you about a couple different things, and it all has to be studied and looked into." But I do work in Tennessee, I do work in Florida, as you do, and neither one of those have a state income tax. So it's putting more money in people's pockets. So the more money we can put back in people's pockets, the better it is for them. They can go buy the food they want to. They don't have to sacrifice. I was talking to a lady recently. She said, "I have to decide whether I buy all my medicine or whether I buy food." And it should never come to that in the United States. It shouldn't. So the state of Tennessee, what they did was they raised their sales tax up to 9%, and in some places 9.75%. But in Florida, in many cases, it's 7% or less. There's some places we do work at that are 6% sales tax. Now, how do they do it? Now, one of the things they do is a sin tax, is what they call it. And it's like tobacco and alcohol. They have extra taxes on those. That's an option. But one of the main things that they do is vacation taxes. So your hotel motel taxes, your VRBO taxes, they do. We don't have the same amount of tourism that's coming to Georgia, but what we do have is the largest port on the East Coast. So we import stuff from all over the world. And one of the things we look at is if you were to tack on $200, $300 per container, it's not going to be a blip on the radar for somebody that is importing. They're not going to stop importing. They're not going to ship it to another port like Jacksonville or whatnot because the shipping costs too much. But that could generate hundreds of millions of dollars that would help ease the deficit at the state. Another thing I was looking at is, from a business standpoint, I mean, you know how it is. I mean, the way that you make profit is you have to increase sales, which in a government standpoint is taxes, or you have to decrease costs, right? And that's spending. And the gap there is profit. I mean, that's common sense. So do we increase taxes? I'm going to be against any taxes that we can have that we can reduce. I want to do away with all taxes, but does it generate income? So if we're able to decrease the costs on, government municipalities, one way to look at that is be able to say what's in it for the municipality. So if we're able to say that in your department, for every dollar that you save, 20% of that goes back to salary for people in that department, SG&A items, so we're not looking at cutting out bridges and stuff like that because that's a safety issue. We're not talking about taking away police vehicles and items that they need, because that's a safety issue. We need infrastructure and we need safety. But other items that they could cut out, because the whole mentality in government is if you don't use it, you what?
Lose it.
Lose it. So they're going to spend it. They're going to get steak dinners here and this, that, and the other because they may need it next year, right? So if we're able to say that for every dollar that you save, 20 cents of that goes back to salary proportional to your range in that department. So the janitor and the department chair are getting different proportion of that 20%. But 80% of that's going to go back to the state. I think that you're going to see tens of millions of dollars in savings the first year, and probably north of 100 million the second year once people start seeing this as a legit situation. And that solves other issues. Again, it's putting more money in people's pocket with regular employees and government employees. And that helps your economy too, because people are going to spend money if they have it, which helps your economy.
I'll tell you
items.
I'll tell you something that I'm discovering that I'm not in favor of much anymore, and that's development authorities. Development authorities have given all these tax abatements to all these different industries. And what we've found out through doing some research is that 85% of these businesses who got these abatements would have came here anyway, even without the abatements. Mm-hmm. So we gave away the farm for nothing, right? So, and one of the ways that I think that we can also prevent ourselves from being able to raise sales tax is by eliminating a lot of the ability to give abatements to businesses moving here. That does the same exact thing that you talked about, the fees to the ports and such, eliminating these development authorities from being able to enter into these deals. And then we find out most of the time you've got people associated with these deals are going to jail because payoffs are happening. So it's already, you know what, there may have been a time for these authorities, but I think their time has passed. I'd like to see you guys, when you're elected to the legislature, do something about phasing out these development authorities, Britt. That's what I'd like to see.
One thing I'm big on is government transparency. Anytime you can be transparent, people's minds will wander and they're going to assume the worst, but I never think that government has a place in private business. 85% of Americans are employed by small businesses. So cutting red tape for them needs to be a priority. And there's a situation, without going into much detail, but a company was given $1.5 billion in incentives to come to the state of Georgia. And there's been a lot of negative fallout over that. I mean, then people that spoke up about it, that they ended up having the state go after them and try to recoup court fees. And I'm like, listen, whether you agree with the whole topic or not, whatever side of the aisle you believe in, the mere fact that the government gave their tax dollars to a private industry and then went after them to try to recoup more tax dollars because they were trying to squelch the First Amendment. And it's just wrong.
And I know what you're talking about. And that organization, those initial deals were led by a development authority, right?
That's right. There's only a couple from what I gathered that are still active in the state. And, the thing that bothers me the most about it, and I think most people, is these are unelected officials. Now, I know some people that sit on these JDA boards, and, some of the people are really good people. One of them's a county commissioner that I respect a lot in Newton County. But, anytime that we can elect and hold those people accountable, it's better, right? So,
yeah, but you've got two elected officials that are suspended from Newton County right now because of dealings they did on a development authority behind the scenes, payoffs, right? So, I mean, just you've got Marcellus Baines and Stephanie Lindsay both suspended right now for that kind of shenanigans. And that's just reality.
Well, I don't know all the details of their specific situations. And, that's for, we got to presume innocence until proven guilty. So I want to grant them that. I've heard stuff on both sides of it, but I don't know enough about the specifics to speak. I mean, I know you've probably.
I have researched this, and I'm going to tell you what. I don't want to be either one of them when they go to court.
Well, anytime the GBI and the FBI gets involved, that's usually not a good sign. But yeah, hopefully for their benefit, hopefully it was all above board and just miscommunication. But we do need to hold people accountable when they're stealing the people's money, and or they're giving it away to private industry. There needs to be accountability there.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, and I sat on the Board of Education, and development authorities can actually, the Rockdale County Development Authority can actually give a tax abatements even if the board doesn't want them to, because we don't have the authority to say no. They can just say, okay, this business is coming here, and Board of Education, you're not going to collect taxes because
Wow.
we're gonna that's the authority that these authorities have. They do not have to have the permission of the county, the Board of Education, or municipalities to go to enter into these tax abatement deals. They have the authority all on their own, and that is. And you mentioned it; they're not elected officials,
Yeah.
and that's dangerous. It is very dangerous. So
Now, there
that
are some elected officials on the board, but they're not elected to this board
to that board in particular, correct? Well, and it depends on what kind of board it is. Like those joint boards you're talking about, you'll have elected officials on them. But then when you've got these local development authorities, they don't have elected officials on. So, but then like the economic councils will have elected officials on them, like the Conyers Rockdale Economic Council. They have elected officials on it, but the Rockdale County Development Authority does not. So that's the way it is. I just personally have just seen bad dealings go on with this. Would really love to see you guys in the legislature clip their wings.
Well, I know in Putnam County, they got a huge issue over there. I mean,
well, our friend George Kelichek, who just entered the show, owns property in Putnam County, and George was just telling me the other day about that it was a bad issue over there in Putnam County.
Yeah, I went to high school with two of the guys on different sides of the issue, and it's interesting because that's where two of our businesses is in Putnam County. So it's been interesting. I haven't followed it as closely since I don't live there anymore. But yeah, it's definitely a hot issue, and but again, that's where you go back to accountability. The people that are up for re-election have challengers. So now the people get to choose. They get to do their own research and choose which side of the aisle they want to be on.
And I've said that all along, right? That I think that the best thing about our electoral process is the fact that people can run against people who are in office, and the fact that you can run against somebody. And I think a lot of times when people are in office, somebody runs against them, I think it makes them do a better job. Because I think when they start thinking, well, why did they run against me? What have I done that, and then they start thinking about it and they start doing a better job with whether they want to or not, right? So George Kelichek just put a comment up on here. Representative Dale Washburn, District 141, is reviewing development authority items in Georgia right now. Mm-hmm. So I think you already do have state reps that are looking at these development authorities and revamping what authority they do have and scaling it back because some things have just got out of control. Because I think it's the big portion where you mentioned they're not elected, and who are they accountable to? And that's an issue. Mm-hmm. So you talked about the taxes, right? So, and I think everybody in Georgia is really interested in that, and especially property taxes. So, and I think people want, something to happen with that even more than what's happened. And we'll see what happens with that even further. I think in a couple of legislative sessions, I think that the legislature is going to deal with that even further. What's your thought about that, Brett?
Well, one of the biggest concerns I have right now is for our senior citizens. And, you have pension plans that aren't increasing in value, and they retired on a fixed income. And people will say, well, the millage rate went down. Well, that's great, but the property value tripled in a 4-year span. So we're, even with homestead exemptions, people are being priced out of their homes. And it's not right. I mean, we're preying currently, it appears from the outside, that we're preying on our most vulnerable, which are our elderly. And, you have people that are widows, widowers, maybe they raise their kids, their grandkids, all their memories are in a house, and they're having to sell it to pay for property taxes. And then you have these guys that come in and try to, swoop in and steal it from out from under them. And, with all these grandiose promises or, tax sales. And it's just wrong. We have to find a way to either freeze, eliminate portions of it. Maybe it's you're not going to like this being on the school board, but maybe be able to allow some of our seniors to be able to opt out of the school section of the property taxes.
Brett, I'm going to tell you, I disagree with that. Let me tell you what I disagree with. I don't think they should opt out of just school property taxes, but municipal and county. I think when you're 72 years old, you shouldn't pay property taxes.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you turn 65, you start graduating out. That's my opinion, right? Because the average lifespan in Georgia is 75, 76 years. Let's say at 72, you're 100%. The average Georgian is going to get 4 years. And then when they pass away, that property goes back on the tax rolls. So that property is only going to be off the tax rolls a limited time period. I've actually proposed this to legislators to introduce, right? I don't think it just should be school property taxes that seniors are exempt from. They should be exempt from all taxes, not just school property taxes, but all taxes. And there's where it gets controversial, because then those very people who say that thing about opt them out of the school, all of a sudden don't think it's a good idea when you want to opt them out of everything. And I think if you're going to opt them out of one, you have to opt them out of all, because it's so devastating to them. Opt them out of the one doesn't really help enough, Britt. It doesn't.
And like I said, I was talking to a lady in Social Circle this past week, and her comment was, we got to do something with property taxes. I said, yes, ma'am, I agree. And she said, I'm having to decide whether I buy medicine or buy food. So I'm sitting there trying to help discuss with her some options for a food pantry that's nearby and all these other options and everything. But that's a Band-Aid on the issue. We have to figure a way, like you were saying, to, take care of our most vulnerable.
Well, and I think, we have in Georgia, we have a school funding system that's obsolete now, and it's needed revamped for years. The thing is, Georgia has been overtaxing their citizens for years. That's why we're getting these rebates and these refunds and these credits. And that's why we have one of the largest surpluses that they've ever had in the state coffers. It's because the state has been overtaxing citizens for years. So if they've been overtaxing us for this long, then they could have adjusted the school funding formula long ago, right? And that would have eased the burden on local municipality, on local school boards from raising taxes. Because do you know why these local school boards have to raise the property taxes? Because the state mandates that they pay an increase in health care and retirement, and it's mandated. 1 year, the Rockdale County Board of Education was mandated an $11 million increase. Okay. So they had to increase that by 11 million. That means they had to raise property taxes. But then when you raise property taxes, do you know what that kicks in? That kicks in that the next year the state gives you less money because you raised your local tax portion. So it's a catch-22. Raise your local tax portion because they mandated you spend this money they're not going to fund. And when you do that, they fund you less because you raised your local taxes. So that started this domino effect. So it's crazy. So we've got to do better, right? We've got to do better. So George said that SB 33 was signed today by the governor. So that's one of the tax bills.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, to your point, my brother-in-law is a state senator up in Tennessee, and one of the things he was talking about is anytime you have a surplus at the state level, this means you tax the citizens too much. So I get the whole mindset of retained earnings or rainy day fund, but at some point you can't keep preparing nonstop for the next COVID or the next whatever virus that comes about. We have to start looking at, all right, people need to make sure that their quality of life is up and they're not just trying to get by. Um, I mean, there has to be something more than feeling like you're a slave to the tax man.
Well,
I mean, I
well
saw
George,
a picture the other day, and this guy had a picture next to his desk, and he said, I keep this picture next to my desk to remind me who I work for every day. And he picks it up, and it just says IRS.
well, you do know that the state's not giving us back that money really out of the goodness of their heart. You do know the Georgia Constitution only allows them to keep so much of a surplus, right? So they had to give it back to us because they weren't allowed to keep it because they exceeded the amount that they were allowed to have in surplus. That's why we got it back. It wasn't because they really wanted to. It's because the Constitution required them to. That's why
But
we got the money back.
you got to spend it any way you can to get, publicity, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, but you don't hear that, do you? You don't hear that. You don't hear any of that, right? So it's like, we're giving it back. No, you're giving it back because you had to, because you're not allowed to keep it because the Constitution says you can only have X much surplus. That's the same thing with Board of Educations. They just upped it, but Board of Educations are only allowed to have X much of a surplus. You're not allowed to have more than X must, extra in your account, a surplus. So, and that's the way with the state of Georgia, they're only allowed to have so much surplus. And when it reaches that, they have to find a way to get it back to the citizens. So this year we're getting the money back in the income tax, and they're also giving us the property tax credits again this year.
Excellent.
So
that's better than a Christmas turkey,
It is better than a Christmas turkey. I agree with that. Or a honey baked. I don't know. Those honey baked hams, it's like buying gold. So,
yeah. Don't give me a fruitcake for sure.
No, I got you. Somebody put something. Okay. Oh, yeah. Clayton said spending and budgets often look like use it or lose it. Terrible motivation. And you mentioned that already before Clayton came in. I've worked on federal projects before, and we were coming near the end of a project, and they would come to us and say, "Hey, we've got this $250,000 we have to spend. If we don't spend it, we won't get it next year. And it's June the 26th, and we've got to spend it by June the 30th because if we still have it, they'll think we don't need it, and our budget cycle starts and they'll cut it." So I have been, unfortunately, in the windfall position of being there when they had to throw out.
But imagine if you ran your household like that. This is an asinine argument. You'd be bankrupt all the time. The first mistake, anything comes up, it's just nothing in savings, nothing, it's just a poor mentality.
You and I can't do that. We can't run a business that way, and we can't run a household that way, right? But we're expected to run government agencies that way. Yeah. I mean, and that's ridiculous, right? And that's some of the reform that needs to occur, budgeting reform. Would you agree?
Yeah, we'll do like SP 1262, the common sense law.
There you go. I like that. I like that a lot. So, I mean, we just need to realize that some things that government does just doesn't make sense. It's not things that we would do in everyday life. And I think that's what we need to realize. We need to run government more like an actual business.
Yeah.
And instead of like, I had somebody on the show the other day and they kept talking about all these free things. And I did say, well, you do know somebody's got to pay for that. When they said, well, they'll pay for it. And I said, well, who are they? They were talking about rich people, right? So it was like, they'll pay for it. Rich people never pay for anything.
That's Washington and New York City, how that's working out for them. Washington did like a 9% tax if you're a millionaire or billionaire or whatever. And, they lost 4 of their wealthiest people in the first,
they moved, right?
Florida.
Yes. They
Florida
move.
and Texas. Yeah.
They're
No
not going
state.
to do that. And let's just say, and you torture a business that way, right? So let's just say they would put some sort of excise, whatever. They would say it's 15%, whatever. Do you know what I'm going to do, Brent? I'm going to raise my prices 15% to cover that. You are
So,
too.
so let's put this in like just common conversation. Okay. So let's view your business like a state would, right? So let's say state of Washington, like we were just talking about, and you say, okay, your best employees are typically the ones that end up making the most money, right?
Yep.
Outside of an owner or whatever. And just saying, you know what we're going to do is we're going to tax those employees at a higher rate so that the lower level employees don't have to pay as much taxes. Well, those employees are going to say, well, I'm just going to leave and go to another company because that's not fair. So what do they end up doing? They end up losing their best employees, and they end up with more taxes for the lower level earners. Oh, that's the same way a state is. You go to New York when she said, we're just going to tax these guys, and if they don't like it, they can go down to Florida. Well, now she's begging them to come back. I mean, it's the same mentality. You're just changing it from a state to a business.
It is. It's the same exact mentality, and that's crazy, right? So we've got to realize we got to quit operating in insanity.
Yeah.
Right. It's insane. Quit doing it.
Well, Benjamin Franklin said, "Common sense isn't all that common."
No, Ben was right. He was 100% right with that.
And that was the 1700s,
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, I think that's what a lot of people don't realize. I think as far as with being elected official and running for office, that common sense thing, right? Knowing that I'm going to go and look at it from a practical standpoint. You don't have a lot of people do that. They try to look at it in too complicated of a way instead of just looking at it in a simplified way. So that's what you're going to bring to this, Brett. You're going to bring, I'm going to look at this at a simple way. How does it really impact the members of the people in my district and Georgians? Mm-hmm. And is this really good for them or bad for them? That's what you're going to do, isn't it?
Yeah. 100%. And talking about negative repercussions, things that unintended consequences. My brother-in-law were talking about how they had outlawed fentanyl in the state of Tennessee. And they said that if somebody were to pass away from an overdose of fentanyl and you helped traffic it, automatic death penalty. So what ended up happening was the fentanyl was traveling around the state of Tennessee. So nobody was using, I say nobody. The fentanyl use in finding fentanyl busts had drastically reduced. Now, the unintended consequence was meth use skyrocketed. Now, is that unintended consequence worth the justify the rule and the amendment in the law? There's been a whole lot more people that have recovered from meth use than fentanyl use. Most fentanyl use, you end up overdosing, it seems like. So they were happy with that unintended consequence. So there's always the hidden unintended consequence, and is the juice worth the squeeze? And that's what you battle a lot, I believe, as a political figure that is making laws. Is, okay, what am I not seeing in this? Because it looks like common sense. It looks like this is the best for the people. What am I not seeing that is a blind spot that I do need to see? And you sit there and you go round table. That's one of the things that we're big on. Brett Dunn is another good person. We were talking about this. If he was, blessed to get elected, and I'm blessed enough to get elected, we want to get with all of the elected officials in our communities, our city council, our mayors, our county commissioners, and bring a roundtable twice a year. Okay, what are you seeing in your communities? What are you needing the most? How can we facilitate? Because Brett and I both believe, it's beautiful. Just remember, vote for Brett, right? One of the two. But we talk about that is like, how can we get to a point where we're facilitators for our county commissioners, for our city council? Because the closer you get people and accountability to the constituents, the better it is for them.
100%. All government is local.
Mm-hmm.
all decisions are local, whether we want to believe it or not, right? It the most important things that happen on the local level, and that's where I think that's where we need to get back to. I like that mentality and that thinking, right? You're getting back to basics and back to, what can we do in our local neighborhood, and that worked at once upon a time. It really did. It really
Well,
did
I think
work.
that's how our founding fathers intended it. You know, that's just, it's a government for the people, by the people. When it's all said and done, Larry, you and I have talked about this before. Yes, I am running to represent the people in the state of Georgia in the District 114. But in all reality, you're just warming a seat. You're renting a seat. You're doing it in a standpoint that you're trying to serve. But in 10 years, nobody's going to remember who served in that seat.
I say that all the time, Brett. I said, this. It's not my seat. It's your seat.
That's right.
This is not my seat. This is your seat. And if I treat that seat with that respect, that it's not mine, that it's yours, I'll do a better job.
But if we can get it to a point where it is revered in a fact that people know that whoever sits in this seat you have to be able to serve. We're setting the standard that if you sit in the District 114 seat, you're going to work your tail off for the people of this district and for the people of Georgia, and be able to represent in a way that their families, their kids, their grandkids will be proud of one day. Because the worst thing in the world is that we just tuck our tails and cower, and we live on our knees to a government that's going to take advantage of us. We have to be able to set a new standard that if you sit in this seat, in District 114 seat, you are there for the people, by the people, and by God, you will serve, and serve in a way that's going to make people proud.
And you can't ask for anything more than that, can you? I don't think you can. Brett, well, you know what? It's 8:50. So we've been on here 50 minutes. And I told you I would at some point tell you, hey, that this is what it is. We've been on here this long.
Just hanging out with friends.
That's right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to let you do one last spiel, who you are and why the people need to vote for you. And then we're going to wrap it up and call it a night.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm a Christian. I'm just a servant. And honestly, that's all we want to do, is be able to serve. We want to serve you in this district. We want to serve you in this state. We want to do it in a way that you're going to find is a man of integrity, honor, and is not afraid for standing up for what is right. If you're looking for a pushover, if you're looking for somebody that just wants a title or to be able to wear a badge of honor, I'm the wrong man. But if you're looking for somebody who is going to fight for you and fight for what's right, and be the one that first one through the walls, the one that gets all the bruises, I'll be that man. I'll be the one that'll fight for you. And I'm always going to be accountable to you, because this is your seat.
Can't ask for anything better. Thanks, Brett. So just so you guys know, I will be doing a show Wednesday. We will have congressional candidate Everton Blair on. He is the former chairman of the Gwinnett County School Board. He will be coming on Wednesday, running for Congressional District 13, which was held by the late Congressman Scott, who passed away a week before voting started. So we do have a vacant congressional seat here in Rockdale County, and somebody new is going to win that seat this time. And I told these guys that a bunch of them were running, and I told them the only reason we're going to have a new congressman is because Congressman Scott passed away. Because I think he would have squeaked out a win. I really do. But now somebody new is going to win. So Everton's one of these guys coming on, and I look forward to hearing what he's got to say. So Brett, if you just hang on after we click off of here, we'll talk a second. But guys, I want to thank you. Tune back in on Wednesday. We'll have the congressional candidate on. And then Saturday, and then Sunday and Monday, we've got two local candidates running for judge on. Sunday, we'll have Justin Kinney running for state court judge. And on Monday, the day before election, we'll have Judge Clarence Cuthbert running for Superior Court judge. So thanks, everybody.